What's good, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Gifted X Buckets. It's your host with the most. My name is Gifted. You can follow me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all things Gifted at GiftedxBlade. But without further ado, I want to get right into it. So this is my first video. I've never had to stare in front of a camera and look at imaginary people and talk hoops or just talk anything, right? So for me, this is a brand new experience, but I appreciate everyone who tuned in to see what I had to say. If you're new, hit that like button and subscribe. We're gonna try to build up, and I want to be as consistent with the uploads as possible. I don't know exactly what my frequency as far as uploading will be, but I'm gonna drop this video and see how things go. But today I wanted to talk about Ben Simmons. He doesn't want to be in Philadelphia. We all saw the same reports. So in this video today, I want to talk about the places he's going to. But before we do that, I first want to break down how I view Ben Simmons. I'm a person that views him as a guy that is not overvalued, but if anything is right now undervalued. So first off, Ben Simmons is a good player. I want to preface my comments with that. Ben Simmons is a good player. I understand his clear offensive deficiencies, but ultimately, I feel strong in saying that Ben Simmons is still a great player. He's still a phenomenal defender. The thing is, his fit in Philadelphia did not work. That's over. I don't believe that they can make that work, especially if he keeps a coach like Doc Rivers on the team, which I'll get into him a little later. My thing about Ben Simmons is his potential many times in the past has been a little overstated. They keep saying he can be the next LeBron James with his handling ability and his passing ability, but the mentality of LeBron James to consistently be aggressive in and out on a night in, night out basis, Ben Simmons doesn't have that, and that's fine. Is it possible for him to develop that motor on another team? Possibly, but for me personally, I feel like the Ben Simmons slander has been a little over the top. I do feel like he's still a phenomenal player, and I feel like in a new situation where he's one of the leading guys with a bunch of spacing and shooting around him, he could thrive. I do believe that his defense will transfer. The thing about Philadelphia is having Joel Embiid as the best player on that team is the right move to make, because Embiid deserves his touches in the post, and rightfully so, because he's the best player on that team. That leaves Ben Simmons in many bad situations where he's unable to be impactful, and a lot of that is on Ben Simmons. He has not really came into the league with a jump shot or a perimeter centric type of game. He's mainly only at the rim, but a lot of his flaws are just saying, oh, he can't shoot the ball and he won't shoot the ball, and that's valid. But the bigger flaw is the aggression, right? Like not taking a whole lot of shots, trying to take a bunch of smart shots. And what that tells me is he partly has a fear of taking too many shots because he wants to help his team all the way through. And I feel like because of that desire to help his team, he's kind of crippling them in a way. And I kind of feel like with that, you have to like really look at what type of player he is and understand that. So for me personally, when he has Joel Embiid on his team and he's the one who's demanding post touches, Ben does not view himself as a threat from three, and he doesn't want to mess up. So he doesn't really take a whole lot of shots. And you saw it rear its ugly head specifically this year in the playoffs. He had multiple games where he only had like 4 or 5 points, only took like 3 or 4 shots in the fourth quarter. It was kind of embarrassing. It was really bad. And I don't want to excuse Ben Simmons for having a performance like that in the playoffs. It was terrible. But for me personally, when you're a coach of a team as Doc Rivers is, and when you're the best player on the team as Joel Embiid is, after a game like that, I know emotions are running high, but you cannot come out and insult and throw shots at one of your best players on the roster. You just can't do that. And for me personally, when they did that, I always said this is going to reach a point where Ben Simmons remembers all of these comments, and when it comes down to coming back to Philadelphia, he might want to request a trade, because there was a lot of flagrant disrespect, not just from his teammates, but also on social media. Social media took those comments and they blew them up, and they crucified Ben Simmons on a lot of places. So for me personally, I think it's time for him to go. And for me, the number one destination will be the Sacramento Kings. The number one thing you have to look at whenever you're drafting a trade, right? If you're trying to think, okay, what are the most important tools? The first thing is salary. The Kings work well because De'Aaron Fox has a contract extension that kicked in to where he's making similar money to Ben Simmons. It might be off $1 million or $2 million, but other pieces can be thrown in the deal. The focus is, I think you would trade Ben Simmons for De'Aaron Fox. Now, I understand. Gifted. The Sacramento Kings are not good. We understand that. They are not a good team. 100%. But in my estimation, because they're not a good team, that's the sole reason why they're trying to get Ben Simmons. I always say this about him, right? As good of a player as Ben Simmons is, the question marks on his game are considerable to the point where I think he would thrive better on a team that is not geared towards trying to win a championship. He needs time to be able to really develop his game, get some confidence back, and really be that guy that has time to grow in his game. And if he gets traded to a contending team, there's not really much space or time for that. They're going to expect him to go. And that can cripple him further. So for me personally, Sacramento is the perfect destination. And I'm going to tell you why. The reason why you trade Fox is this. You have 4 guards on your roster. I personally, as a basketball fan, do not believe that all 4 guys on this roster can be maximized if they're all on the team at the same time. I just don't believe it. There's only so many guard spots to go by, and I think Halliburton and Fox should be the guys who start, right? But for me personally, if you're drafting Davion Mitchell 7 overall, you don't draft him to be a guy that comes off your bench as a backup point guard. You're drafting him to develop him to see what he can turn into. So I personally feel like he deserves a look at a starting role. And ultimately, by trading Ben Simmons, you can physically play Halliburton and Davion Mitchell in starting roles alongside Ben Simmons at the 4. And I like that a lot better because defensively, you have Ben Simmons, Halliburton, and Davion Mitchell. Guys who can defend at a high level, guys who have a high IQ for the game, in my personal estimation. And I think the biggest question mark with the Kings has always been not their offense, because they've always had like a high top 6, top 10 offense. It's mainly been their defense, which is always ranked historically low at the bottom. And I feel like changing that culture like that to have a guy like Ben Simmons, who would automatically be the best defender on their team, paired with 2 other high IQ guys, even though your roster is not necessarily filled out, I like that core better than, I would say, the Kings core right now. And the reason behind that is, ultimately, I believe to maximize those guys on a roster, you should start 3 of those guards. But by doing that, offensively, it can be potent, right? But defensively, I think that there is a gap and a ceiling to how far a team led by that 3-guard lineup could go as far as trying to win a championship. And for me personally, for the Kings, if you're already in a rebuilding process, your process is basically in the next 5 to 6 or 7 years, you're aiming to win a championship. And you would have Ben Simmons under contract for 3 more years. And adding him to this team, I think their upside goes up tremendously high. You would only have to get a couple more pieces around that to really make that a championship team. A lot of stuff matters as far as like how you're going to develop these guys and all that. But I think it's super important that they hone in on that. So for me personally, I would do that. There's a lot of question marks, obviously, but the thing about the Kings is because they're such a bad team, you can still get Ben Simmons and still not go that far in the playoffs or even get to the playoffs, which means you can still get higher picks in the coming years and really fill out exactly what that roster is. But also, I don't anticipate that the Kings will be in the playoffs anytime soon with their current coach and with De'Aaron Fox as their best player anyway. So for me personally, there's not really much that the Kings have left to lose with that. And I just feel like having him on the team means you're trusting the peaks of what Halliburton and Davion Mitchell could be as a collective unit. And then seeing Ben Simmons in a situation where there is spacing, where he's the clear guy as far as handling the ball and giving him options for guards who can actually like run a screen action with Ben Simmons and have Ben Simmons screen for them to where he could also be a lob threat is really appealing for me. There's a lot of versatility with that type of offense, and defensively they're going to be really, really good. So for me personally, that's why I would do it. And from the Philadelphia side of things, the reason why that makes sense is this. Ultimately, because Ben Simmons wants to be out, and the fact that he's saying he might not be there for training camp, his value went from here to here. Teams are infatuated with what Ben Simmons could be, but they're not trading for him to see like what he could be now. So from my perspective, because his value is so low, there's not that many valuable packages out there left. And I think it'll ultimately come down to what the Kings have to offer and what the Minnesota Timberwolves have. Because ultimately, if you're able to get D'Angelo or De'Aaron Fox with some other guys, ultimately, those are the only two places where you're close to matching the money and there's value that you can get back in return. And I personally feel like because he said he wants to be in California, trading him to Sacramento will be a place where he might be more open to go to. And I personally feel like if it came down to him being there or being in Minnesota, he would lean towards the Kings. So I think the Kings are in a prime position to actually get Ben Simmons. And that's why I think it ultimately makes sense. But again, we don't exactly know what's going to happen. So I'm curious to see what'll come of this Ben Simmons thing. But to me, the Kings are the clear guys to actually have an option. There was a report which should be right here that dropped that said he wouldn't make the team because they wanted De'Aaron Fox and Halliburton. But I feel like ultimately, as time passes, they will keep talking, and I think the Kings will be able to get Ben Simmons. One last thing to recap. The reason why the Kings make the most sense to me is I'm looking at upside, right? And I think the upside of a 3-guard set with De'Aaron Fox, Davion Mitchell, and Tyrese Halliburton in the next 4 to 6 years is lesser than the upside of Ben Simmons, Davion Mitchell, and Tyrese Halliburton, in my personal estimation. You may disagree with me on that, but that's personally what I see, because small 3-guard lineups don't really go that far in the league. But having Ben Simmons at the 4 unlocks a newer dynamic for that team on both ends of the basketball court. So for me personally, I would say the Kings make the most sense. Obviously, there's a whole lot of question marks, but given what Ben Simmons' value is now and the way that he is depreciated as an asset, I think the Kings make the most sense. And the worst case is, if this experiment doesn't work out, you can flip him another year and still get value back for him if you're the Sacramento Kings. So yeah, that's why I would choose them. But yeah, I appreciate those of you who made it to the very end. I try not to make this video as long. I'm going to see how this looks in editing. But yeah, I will catch y'all later. It's your host with the most, GiftedxBuckets. We out.